And I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيدة رئيسة. أرحب.
Thank you, Madam President. I welcome the participation of His Excellency, the Minister for Foreign Affairs here in New York, and his attendance of a part of the meeting. I thank Denmark for its support for Syria and the Syrian people. I thank you, Madam President, and I thank your team for managing the work of the Security Council this month. I extend my thanks to the Special Envoy, Mr. Pedersen, and Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Mr. Tom Fletcher, and Mrs. Jumana Saif for their briefings today. Madam President, Syria is moving forward at this pivotal stage in its history. Following the National Dialogue Conference and based on its outcome, and with the aim of preparing the legal framework for the transitional phase, the Presidency of the Republic formed a committee to draft the constitutional declaration, which was subsequently approved by the President of the Republic. The Constitutional Declaration affirms the Syrian state's commitment to preserving the unity of Syrian territory, achieving societal stability, and safeguarding civil peace. It criminalizes calls for division and secession, the request for foreign intervention, and reliance on external powers. It guarantees freedom of belief and the cultural diversity of Syrian society in all its components. It emphasizes the prevention of sedition and incitement to violence and calls for combating all forms and types of violent extremism. The Constitutional Declaration stipulates that all rights and freedoms set forth in international human rights treaties and conventions ratified by Syria are an integral part of the declaration. Under this declaration, the state safeguards the right to political participation and the formation of political parties on national grounds. The declaration highlights the state's protection of women's status, dignity, and role in the family and society, and ensures their right to education and employment. The Constitutional Declaration established the system of governance for the 5-year transitional phase. It included provisions regulating the work of the 3 branches, legislative, executive, and judicial. The declaration affirmed cooperation with the international community and international cooperation organizations for reconstruction, facilitating the return of refugees and displaced, and achieving national reconciliation. In pursuit of justice, the declaration provided for the establishment of a transitional justice body to provide redress to victims and survivors and honor martyrs. In the presence of the chairwoman in the presence of Madame Carla Kinderd, President of IIMP, I would like to emphasize the importance of identifying the fate of missing persons. This humanitarian file is of paramount importance. We must put an end to the suffering of the families who must be enabled to know the fate of their loved ones. We look forward to our meeting later today. Madam President, while the Syrian people look forward to a future based on justice, freedom, and dignity, and to an end of bloodshed, tragic events took place on the Syrian coast. Armed groups, led by members of the former regime's security apparatus, launched treacherous and condemned attacks on general security, municipal administrations, and healthcare centers. These were followed by violations, summary executions, acts of vandalism and looting committed by some undisciplined volunteer groups. We had previously conveyed to the Security Council and to the Secretary General the content of the paper circulated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates circulated as document S/2025/152. The Syrian government condemned these heinous crimes, and the Presidency of the Republic formed an independent national committee to investigate the violations against civilians, public institutions, and members of security force and members of the army, and to identify those responsible. The committee will submit its report to the Presidency within 30 days. The Syrian leadership affirmed that the new Syria will be a state of law and that the law will apply to all. It emphasized that any attack on the sanctity, blood, property of people is a red line, and that the blood of the innocent will not go unpunished regardless of the identity of the perpetrators. In accordance with the highest national interest and driven by a commitment to achieve civil peace among the components of the Syrian people, the Presidency of the Republic formed a high committee to safeguard civil peace and strengthen national unity during this sensitive stage. Moreover, as part of efforts to consolidate stability, an agreement was signed to integrate the SDF into the institutions of the Syrian Arab Republic, affirming the unity of Syrian territory and rejecting partition. The agreement guarantees the rights of all Syrians to representation and participation in the political process and all state institutions based on competence, regardless of their ethnic or religious background. It recognizes the Kurdish community as an integral part of the Syrian state, which guarantees its right to citizenship and all constitutional rights. The agreement also provides for the integration of all civil and military institutions in northeastern Syria into the administration of the Syrian state, including border crossings, the airport, and oil and gas fields. The executive and implementation committees have begun implementing the agreement within the timeline set for the end of this year. Madam President, the Syrian government reiterates its commitment to enhancing its partnership with the UN and its specialized agencies. The Syrian people eagerly await the improvement of humanitarian and living conditions, the launch of economic recovery and reconstruction, and the return to a path of sustainable development. In this context, the Syrian government has renewed the authorization granted to the UN and its specialized agencies to use Bab Salama and Al-Rai border crossings for an additional 6 months, expiring on 3 September 2025. For the first time, represented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates, Syria participated in the 9th Brussels Conference. We express deep gratitude and appreciation to the countries and entities that pledged support for the Syrian people during this conference. We look forward to the fulfillment of these pledges to achieve tangible impact that will be felt by the Syrians as soon as possible. Syria expresses its deep appreciation to the State of Qatar and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, to these two brotherly states, and to the UNDP for the initiative of supplying Syria with gas through Jordan to generate 400 megawatts of electricity. Syria calls on other countries to adopt similar approaches to help alleviate the suffering of the Syrian people as soon as possible. My country underscores the need to move from temporary humanitarian aid to laying the foundations for comprehensive and sustainable solutions through real and tangible measures. This starts with the full lifting of sanctions imposed on the Syrian people to break the shackles of the blockade and allow Syrians to rebuild their homeland and advance towards a better future. We appreciate the measures taken by some countries in order to lift some of the sanctions imposed. We look forward to the full and sustainable lifting of sanctions. Madam President, the Israeli occupation army continues its outrageous violations of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity in violation of international law, the Charter of the UN, relevant resolutions, and the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement. Israeli occupation forces continue their unlawful control by force over vast swathes of Syrian territory in the occupied Syrian Golan, the area of separation, Quneitra Governorate, Mount Hermon, and neighboring areas in the governorates of Daraa and rural Damascus. Meanwhile, recent weeks have witnessed repeated Israeli attacks on various Syrian regions, resulting in the martyrdom of several Syrian civilians. The latest such attack took place today, targeting areas in the governorate of Daraa. Kouaya, the village of Kouaya, in the last hours was subject to violent artillery and air shelling targeting agricultural farms. As a result, 6 civilians were killed and martyred, and the death toll is likely to rise because of the severe injuries and the ongoing aggression. Syria reaffirms the complaint addressed to the President of the Security Council and the Secretary General, circulated as document S/2025/120. Syria strongly condemns the blatant Israeli aggression against its territory. Syria denounces statements by occupation officials calling for what they term the disarmament of the Syrian state in the southern governorates, and their false claims about protecting specific components of the Syrian national fabric. These aggressive practices and provocative statements reveal the Israeli occupation's intent to destabilize Syria's security and stability. Therefore, my country, Syria, calls again on the Security Council to shoulder its responsibilities and take firm and immediate action to compel Israel to immediately cease its ongoing aggression against Syrian territory and to withdraw immediately and unconditionally from all Syrian land. My country, Syria, also calls on all countries with influence to play an active and constructive role in this regard. In conclusion, Madam President, the new Syria grapples with major deadlines and immense challenges. It looks forward to your support at this critical juncture to build a better future for all Syrians, by all Syrians, women, men, and the youth. A future anchored in the values of citizenship, rule of law, and advancement of society. Disregard for life and human dignity must come to an end. This requires confronting destructive foreign agendas and attempt to sow discord, spread hate speech, and incite to violence and terrorism. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.